I still remember the summer when kids started disappearing. It was a slow trickle at first, a boy from the next town over, a girl from a few streets down. The news barely mentioned it. They called it isolated incidents, as if that would make it less terrifying. But those of us who lived here, we knew something was wrong. The warning spread fast. Parents told their kids to stay in groups, to never talk to strangers, and to come straight home after school. But the people taking the children weren't just strangers. They were clever, patient, and worst of all, they knew exactly how to lure their victims. It started with a van. Not the rusty, windowless kind that movies warn you about. This one was painted with bright colors, covered in cartoon characters and balloons. It looked friendly, safe. The kind of van you'd expect at a birthday party. One day, my best friend Tommy and I were riding our bikes near the old train tracks when we saw it parked by the edge of the woods. The side door was open, revealing shelves stacked with toys, brand new action figures, dolls, even video game consoles. A woman stood beside it, her face warm and inviting, like someone's favorite aunt. "Hey, boys," she called, her voice dripping with kindness. "We're giving away free toys today. You can pick whatever you like." Tommy stopped pedaling. "Dude, look at all that stuff." His eyes were practically sparkling. I felt a cold chill run down my spine. "We should go." "Come on," he said. "It's free." Something about the woman's smile put me on edge. It was too perfect, too practiced, like she had rehearsed it 100 times. Her eyes, though, they didn't smile. They stayed fixed on us, unblinking, waiting. "We just have to take your picture for our website," she added casually, holding up a Polaroid camera. "Just so other kids can see how happy you are with your new toy." That was the moment my stomach dropped. What kind of giveaway needed photos of kids? I grabbed Tommy's wrist. "We're leaving." He frowned but followed me as I pedaled away, fast, my heart pounding. Behind us, I heard the woman call out, her voice suddenly sharper, desperate. "Wait. Come back. It's safe, I promise." We didn't stop until we were back on my street, breathless and shaken. Tommy was annoyed, saying I had just cost him a free video game. I didn't care. Something wasn't right about that woman, about that van. The next day, a kid named Jason, one of the younger boys from our neighborhood, was gone. Just vanished. His parents were frantic. His bike was found near the train tracks. I told my mom about the van, the woman, everything. She called the police, but by the time they checked, the van was gone. No signs of it anywhere. More kids disappeared. The town was in a panic. Schools sent home letters, curfews were enforced, but it didn't stop. The people taking the kids knew exactly what they were doing. They changed their tricks, adapted. Sometimes it was a lost puppy, sometimes a man pretending to be a friend of the family. Sometimes, they even used other kids, ones they had already taken, to lure in new victims. Then one evening, I saw the van again. It was parked near the grocery store, and a different man was standing beside it this time. He wore a uniform, like a delivery driver, and he was handing out balloons to a small group of kids. The moment his eyes met mine, I knew he recognized me. I ran. I ran faster than I ever had in my life. I didn't stop until I was inside my house, locking every door and window. I told my mom, and she called the police again. But just like before, by the time they arrived, the van was gone. The disappearances didn't stop for months. Some kids were found, but they were never the same. They wouldn't talk about what had happened, just stared blankly at nothing, like their minds had been wiped clean. Others were never found at all. Eventually, the van disappeared for good. The kidnappings stopped. Life slowly returned to normal, or at least as normal as it could be after something like that. I still think about Jason. About the kids who never came back. I think about the tricks they used, how easily they fooled people, how they almost fooled me. And even now, years later, every time I see a brightly colored van, I feel my stomach twist in fear. Because some monsters don't hide in the dark. Some wear smiles, carry balloons, and promise free toys. But I was wrong. It wasn't over. One night, years later, I was walking home late from a friend's house. The streets were quiet, the kind of eerie silence that makes you feel like something is lurking just beyond your line of sight. As I turned a corner, I saw it. A van. Not just any van, the van. Same cartoon characters, same bright colors. Parked under the dim glow of a street lamp. My breath caught in my throat. Then, the side door slid open. Inside, I saw Jason. He looked exactly the same as the day he disappeared, not a day older. His eyes were wide, desperate, pleading. "Help me," he mouthed. Before I could move, a hand shot out from the darkness, yanking him back inside. The door slammed shut, and the van's tires screeched against the pavement as it sped away. I ran after it, screaming for help, but in moments, it was gone. Just like before. The police didn't believe me. They said my mind was playing tricks, that it was just a coincidence. But I knew the truth. They were still out there. Still watching. Still waiting. And Jason, he was still trapped, somewhere in the dark. The night I saw Jason in that van, I barely slept. My mind kept replaying the way his mouth had formed those two words, "Help me," before he was yanked back into the darkness. I told myself it had to be a nightmare, a trick of my exhausted brain. But deep down, I knew better. Jason had been there. And that meant the people who took him were still out there. For the next few days, I barely left my house. I kept my doors locked, my curtains drawn. Every time I heard an engine outside, my stomach clenched. But the van never came back. Until one night. It was late, maybe 2 in the morning. I was lying in bed, staring at the ceiling, when I heard it. The slow, deliberate roll of tires on pavement. Not speeding, not rushing, just creeping down the street, like a predator sizing up its prey. I swallowed hard, pushing myself out of bed. My hands trembled as I moved to the window, peeking through the slats of my blinds. There it was. The van, parked across the street. The cartoon characters painted on its side seemed distorted in the dim glow of the street lamp, their wide smiles almost sinister. The engine was running, but no one got out. And then, the side door slid open. A figure stepped out, silhouetted against the dim interior light. It was Jason. Still the same, his hair, his clothes, even the scuffed sneakers he had been wearing the day he disappeared. But something was wrong. His movements were stiff, unnatural, like a puppet on invisible strings. He turned his head slowly, scanning the street, until his empty gaze landed on my window. And then he smiled. Not a normal smile. A stretched, unsettling grin, like something was forcing his face to move that way. My breath hitched in my throat. Jason raised a hand and pointed directly at me. I stumbled backward, heart pounding. My mind screamed at me to run, to hide, to do anything, but I was frozen. A moment later, I heard my front door handle rattle. Someone was trying to get in. I ran to my parents' room, shaking them awake. The van. Jason. Someone's at the door. My dad bolted upright, already reaching for the baseball bat he kept under the bed. My mom grabbed her phone, dialing 911 as we hurried toward the front of the house. By the time we got there, the van was gone. The only sign it had ever been there was the lingering scent of something sickly sweet in the air, like cotton candy, but wrong. Rotten. The police arrived within minutes, but there was nothing to investigate. No footprints, no evidence. Just my word against the empty street. That was the moment I realized the truth, they were toying with me. letting me know they hadn't forgotten. That they never forget. The next day, I tried to act normal, but paranoia ate at me. I checked over my shoulder constantly, jumped at every sound. My friends noticed but didn't press me for details. What would I even say? Hey, remember that kid who disappeared years ago? Yeah, I saw him last night, and I think he's part of something unnatural now. No one would believe me. Not even Tommy. Speaking of Tommy, I hadn't heard from him in days. Normally, he was always messaging me about the latest video games or some dumb joke he found online, but my phone had been silent. I tried calling him. Straight to voicemail. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. I biked over to his house that afternoon, knocking on his door. His mom answered, looking tired and frazzled. "Oh, hey, sweetie," she said, forcing a smile. "Tommy's been sick, sleeping a lot. You know how it is." That didn't sit right with me. Tommy never got sick. I hesitated. "Can I see him?" "Not right now, hon, maybe tomorrow." I nodded, stepping back, but as the door began to close, I heard something. A whisper, barely audible. "Help, me." My blood ran cold. "Mrs. Carter," I started, but she had already shut the door. I stood there for a long moment, staring at the house. Every instinct in my body screamed at me to leave, but also told me one thing. Tommy was in danger. That night, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I knew I had to go back. So, at midnight, I grabbed my bike and a flashlight and pedaled as fast as I could toward Tommy's house. The neighborhood was dead silent, the only sound my own breathing and the faint hum of distant streetlights. As I neared Tommy's house, I noticed something odd. His bedroom window was wide open. I crept closer, ditching my bike on the lawn. The curtains fluttered slightly, and for a brief moment, I thought I saw movement inside. Then I heard it. A soft, eerie melody floating through the air. Like a lullaby, but warped, off-key, wrong. The kind of sound that made your skin crawl. I hesitated, then did the dumbest thing I could have possibly done. I climbed through the window. Inside, it was dark, too dark. My flashlight flickered as I swept it around the room. And then I saw Tommy. He was sitting on the bed, facing away from me, shoulders hunched. His breathing was shallow, ragged. "Tommy?" I whispered. Slowly, he turned his head, but only his head. His body remained completely still, unnaturally rigid. His eyes met mine, and they were wrong. Too wide. Too empty. Then he grinned. The same awful, stretched grin Jason had given me. Behind me, the closet door creaked open. I spun around just as a hand, thin, pale, wrong, shot out toward me. I screamed, stumbling backward. Tommy moved, no, lunged, but I barely managed to twist out of the way, scrambling toward the window. The lullaby grew louder, a chorus of whispers joining it, pressing into my skull. "Join us, stay with us, it's safe here." I threw myself out the window, hitting the ground hard. Pain shot up my arm, but I didn't stop. I jumped on my bike and pedaled like hell, my pulse pounding in my ears. As I reached the end of the street, I risked one last glance over my shoulder. Tommy was standing at his window, watching me go. And behind him, just barely visible in the shadows, stood Jason. They were still out there. And now, they had Tommy. But I knew it wouldn't stop there. More kids would disappear. More windows would slide open in the middle of the night. The van would come back, and when it did, I might not escape next time. And worst of all, I wasn't sure I even wanted to. Because, deep down, I could still hear that VO. I barely slept after escaping Tommy's house. My brain refused to shut down, replaying every awful moment, his rigid body, the twisted grin, the thing in the closet reaching for me. And Jason, standing in the dark, watching. They had him now. They had both of them. And I knew, deep down, that I was next. The next morning, I tried to act normal, but my mom could tell something was wrong. She kept asking if I was sick, but what could I say? That my best friend and a boy who had disappeared years ago were now part of something unnatural. That a van full of monsters was hunting me. No one would believe me. So I stayed silent. I went through the motions of my day, but I felt hollow inside. The world outside seemed too bright, too normal. It felt wrong, like a mask covering something rotten underneath. At school, Tommy's seat was empty. His mom had said he was sick, but I knew the truth. He wasn't coming back. At lunch, I overheard whispers. Another kid, Sophie Martinez, hadn't shown up today either. I felt sick. It was happening again. That night, I locked my doors and windows. I kept my flashlight close. I forced myself to stay awake, but at some point, exhaustion won. And that's when I heard it. A soft humming. A lullaby. I jolted upright, heart pounding. The sound drifted in from outside, faint, almost sweet. But I knew better. I crept to my window, pulling the blinds apart just enough to see. The van was back. It sat across the street, engine idling. The cartoon characters on its sides were grinning, their painted eyes seeming to follow me. The side door was open. And they were standing there. Jason. Tommy. Sophie. More kids, ones I didn't recognize. Their faces were pale, their eyes empty. They all wore the same eerie smile. And then, in perfect unison, they raised their hands and pointed at my house. My blood turned to ice. A shadow shifted inside the van. Something big. Something waiting. I staggered back just as a sound echoed through my house. The front door handle. Rattling. I stumbled toward my parents' room, but my legs felt heavy, like I was wading through syrup. The lullaby swelled, pressing into my skull. Join us, stay with us, it's safe here. No. No, I wouldn't listen. I squeezed my eyes shut, shaking my head, trying to fight the pull. I reached for my parents' door. And then my bedroom window slid open. A cold wind rushed in, carrying that sickly sweet scent, the one from the night before. Cotton candy, but spoiled. Rotten. Slowly, I turned. Tommy was inside my room. His feet hovered an inch off the floor. His arms hung limply at his sides. His grin stretched too wide. Behind him, Jason climbed through the window, his movements jerky, wrong. More figures followed. Sophie. Kids I had never seen before. They surrounded me, whispering. It's okay, it doesn't hurt, join us. I screamed. I don't remember much after that. My mind shattered into a blur of terror. Hands grabbed at me, pulling, dragging. The lullaby roared in my head, filling every part of me. I fought. I know I fought. But in the end, it wasn't enough. The next morning, my mom knocked on my door, calling my name. When I didn't answer, she opened it. The room was empty. My window was wide open. A sickly sweet scent lingered in the air. On my bed, my phone lay face up, the screen cracked. One new message was open. From me. Don't be scared, Mom. I'm safe now. The van took me where I belong. And outside, parked at the end of the street, sat the van. Waiting. Smiling. Humming. Calling for the next child. The end.